Only time my canine partner ever refused to enter a room, there was someone standing inside it. At least, that's what I saw. Worked as a canine handler for almost 9 years. During that time, I've taken my dog into places most people wouldn't even step near during the daytime. Abandoned warehouses, dark wooded areas in the middle of winter, rundown houses where suspects were hiding with weapons. My partner is a 4-year-old German Shepherd named Rex. He's trained for tracking and narcotics detection, and he's one of the most reliable dogs I've ever worked with. Rex isn't the kind of dog that panics or hesitates. If I give him a command, he goes. It doesn't matter if the place is dark, dangerous, or unfamiliar. That's why the call we got that night still sticks with me. It was a little after midnight when dispatch requested canine assistance for a search. Patrol officers had tried to stop a man a few blocks away during a routine traffic stop, but the suspect took off running. He cut through several backyards and managed to disappear somewhere inside a quiet residential neighborhood. Officers searched the surrounding streets, but lost sight of him near a 2-story house at the end of a block. The gate to the backyard was open, and the back door of the house was unlocked. One of the neighbors also reported hearing yelling and what sounded like a struggle coming from that direction earlier. Because of that, patrol believed the suspect may have forced his way inside. They swept the first floor, but weren't comfortable declaring the house clear. That's when they called me and Rex. We arrived around 20 minutes later. The neighborhood was quiet and dark, the kind of suburban area where nothing usually happens. A few patrol cars were parked outside the house with their lights off to avoid drawing attention. One of the officers briefed me quickly. The homeowners were out of town, which meant if someone had broken in, there was a good chance they were still inside. I clipped Rex onto a short leash and walked toward the front door. "Search," I told him. Immediately, Rex leaned forward and started pulling. We entered the house and began clearing the first floor. The living room was empty. The kitchen was clear. Laundry room, nothing. Everything inside the house looked normal. No signs of a fight. No overturned furniture. But suspects don't always leave obvious signs. After finishing the first floor, we moved upstairs. The staircase led to a narrow hallway with 3 bedrooms and a bathroom. The air up there felt stale and heavy. All the windows were closed, and the house had that quiet, empty feeling you get when no one has been home for a while. Rex moved ahead of me, sniffing along the carpet and door frames. We checked the first bedroom. Empty. Second bedroom. Also empty. Then Rex turned toward the bathroom at the end of the hallway. He stepped inside and began sniffing along the base of the sink and the edge of the bathtub. At first, everything seemed normal. Then suddenly, he stopped. His entire body went stiff. Rex's ears shot forward and a low growl started deep in his chest. That alone was unusual. Rex rarely growls during a search unless he's detected someone. But what happened next was something I had never seen before. He began barking, not the aggressive bark he uses when he's about to apprehend a suspect. This sounded different, more like a warning. And he wasn't barking inside the bathroom. He was staring out into the hallway. I slowly stepped backward out of the bathroom beside him. "What is it?" I whispered. Rex kept barking, his eyes locked on something down the hall. I followed his gaze. At the far end of the hallway, near the doorway of the last bedroom, I saw a figure, a tall shape standing perfectly still in the darkness. For a moment, I assumed it was one of the officers who had come upstairs without announcing themselves. But something about the way the figure stood didn't seem right. They weren't moving, not even slightly. I raised my voice. "Police department. Identify yourself." No answer. Rex's barking grew louder, but at the same time he began pulling backward. That confused me. Normally, when Rex detects someone, he pulls forward toward them, but now he was trying to move away. "Who's there?" I called out again. Still nothing. Then the figure turned. Without saying a word, it stepped into the bedroom at the end of the hallway and disappeared from view. I immediately reached for my radio. "Possible suspect located upstairs," I said. "End bedroom." I drew my weapon and began moving down the hallway. Rex resisted the entire way. He planted his paws against the floor and leaned backward on the leash. I had to physically guide him forward. He kept glancing at me like he didn't understand why we were going closer. That had never happened before. When we finally reached the bedroom door, Rex completely refused to cross the threshold. He stood frozen in the hallway. I stepped into the room first, weapon raised. The bedroom was empty, completely empty. There was a bed against one wall and a dresser across from it. No one standing inside, no one hiding. I checked the closet, empty. Under the bed, nothing. The window was closed and locked. There was no attic hatch, no crawl space, nothing that could explain where the figure went. By that time, 2 other officers came upstairs to assist. They searched the room with me, every corner, every piece of furniture, even the walls, in case there was some hidden panel. Nothing. Meanwhile, Rex remained in the hallway. One of the officers tried calling him into the room. He wouldn't move. He kept staring inside the bedroom, growling softly. After nearly 20 minutes of searching the entire house again, we still couldn't find anyone. Eventually, we decided to clear the call. As we walked outside, Rex finally relaxed slightly. Once he was back inside his crate in the patrol vehicle, he curled up and laid his head down. But he wouldn't look at me. Usually after a search, Rex looks proud, like he knows he did his job. That night, he just seemed unsettled. I've replayed that moment in my head more times than I can count. Maybe it was the suspect somehow slipping out of the room without us seeing. Maybe there was another exit we overlooked. But if that's the case, I still don't understand Rex's reaction. This is a dog who has chased armed suspects without hesitation. He has entered far more dangerous places than that quiet suburban house. Yet for some reason, he refused to step inside that room. And to this day, Rex has never reacted that way again. I trust that dog more than I trust my own instincts. Which means if Rex believed something was wrong in that room, there's a chance we never actually cleared it. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like the video and let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you love true police horror stories, disturbing real encounters, and late-night calls that officers never forget, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss the next story. The 911 call that night sounded like it came from a little girl, but when we finally found the caller, it was a grown man who had been missing for 2 years. I had been working as a patrol officer for about a year when this happened. I was still pretty new to the department, which meant I usually got stuck with the overnight shifts. My schedule ran from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. Most rookies hate that shift, but I actually didn't mind it. Nights were quieter. You still dealt with drunk drivers, the occasional fight, and the usual traffic stops, but a lot of the time, it was just long stretches of driving around empty streets. Some nights I would sit in a parking lot and listen to podcasts while waiting for calls to come in. But every now and then, something would happen that reminded you why police work can get so unpredictable. The night of this call started with a huge storm. Around midnight, a thunderstorm rolled into town and just sat over the area for hours. Rain flooded several roads and the wind knocked out power in a few neighborhoods. Because of the weather, most officers were parked at different spots across town, trying to respond quickly to accidents or emergencies. Around 2 in the morning, I had my cruiser parked in a grocery store lot near the center of town. Rain was pounding against the windshield so hard that I could barely see the streetlights. That's when the radio crackled. Dispatch came over the air. Unit available for a priority call? I grabbed the mic. Go ahead. There was a short pause before the dispatcher spoke again. We just received a 911 call from a residence on Willow Creek Road. Caller stated they were being held captive inside the house. My attention snapped into focus. Copy that, I said, but dispatch wasn't finished. The caller's voice sounded unusual. What do you mean? Another pause. It sounded like a child, a young girl, but the voice didn't seem natural, almost like someone was altering it digitally. That was strange enough to make the hair on my neck stand up. Then she added something that made it worse. The call disconnected after about 10 seconds. We tried calling back, but there was no answer. I checked the address on the computer screen in my cruiser. I was about 10 minutes away. I'll respond, I said. Another officer named Chris came over the radio a moment later. I'm 5 minutes out from that address. I'll meet you there. Chris had been on the force a little longer than me, but we were both still considered younger officers. Still, I was glad he was coming. Calls involving kidnappings or hostage situations were never routine. I turned my cruiser onto the main road and headed toward the neighborhood. The rain made visibility terrible. By the time I reached Willow Creek Road, the power outage dispatch mentioned had already hit that area. Every streetlight was dark. The entire block was pitch black, except for the headlights from my patrol car. When I turned the corner onto the address we were given, I saw Chris's cruiser parked along the curb. He was already outside, standing under an umbrella. I pulled up next to him and rolled down my window. "You get anything else from dispatch?" I asked. He shook his head. "Nope, just the same weird call." We both looked toward the house. It stood at the end of the street, partially hidden behind overgrown bushes. Even in the rain and darkness, it looked rough. The grass was knee-high. Sections of the roof were sagging. Several windows were covered with old boards. At first glance, it didn't look like anyone should have been living there. That immediately raised a red flag. "Place looks abandoned," Chris muttered. "Yeah," I said, which made the 911 call even stranger. We stepped out of our cruisers and walked toward the house. Rain soaked through our boots as we followed the cracked walkway leading to the front door. Chris turned on his flashlight. I knocked firmly on the door. "Police department." For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then we heard footsteps inside, slow, dragging footsteps. They stopped right behind the door, but it didn't open. I felt that familiar feeling you get when someone is staring at you from the other side. My eyes drifted toward the peephole. Right as I looked at it, a shadow moved back quickly. Someone had been watching us. "Sir," I said loudly, "we received a call from this address. Please open the door." Several seconds passed. Finally, the lock clicked. The door opened about a foot. A man stood in the gap. He looked to be in his early 30s. Overweight, thinning hair, thick glasses. His expression looked nervous, almost frightened. "Can I help you?" he asked. I explained the situation. "We received a 911 call from this address from someone claiming they were being held captive." The man blinked a few times. Then he laughed awkwardly. That must have been a mistake, probably a pocket dial. Something about his reaction didn't sit right with me. I asked if anyone else was inside the house. "No," he said quickly. "I live alone." I nodded. "For safety reasons, we need to check inside." His smile disappeared. Not without a warrant. Legally, he was correct. So I returned to my cruiser and contacted dispatch. Within a few minutes, we were connected with an on-call judge who approved a telephonic warrant. Dispatch emailed it directly to the computer in my car. I printed the confirmation and showed it to the man. His hand started shaking. He stepped aside and opened the door wider. As soon as we walked inside, the smell hit me. Rotting food, garbage, something sour I couldn't identify. I shined my flashlight around the living room. It was disgusting. Dirty dishes stacked everywhere, clothes piled across the floor, cockroaches crawling over everything. It looked like no one had cleaned the place in years. The man stood behind us, shifting nervously. I made a mental note to check for drugs later, but first we needed to make sure no one was being held inside. We moved toward a hallway that led deeper into the house. That's when I stepped on something. I looked down. A pink plastic toy house. A Barbie playset. The exact same one I had bought for my daughter the previous Christmas. I turned to the man. "You said you live alone." He nodded quickly. "I do." "Then why are there kids' toys here?" "Oh," he said, waving his hand dismissively. "My nieces visit sometimes." Chris and I exchanged a look. No responsible parent would bring a child into a house that filthy. We continued down the hallway. 2 doors were open on either side. The first room contained more children's toys. There were even diapers on the floor. In the corner sat something that made my heart skip for a second. A human-shaped figure sitting in a rocking chair. I raised my weapon before realizing what it was, a life-sized doll. It was dressed in women's clothing. Neatly folded piles of dresses and lingerie sat on the bed beside it. Meanwhile, the rest of the house looked like a garbage dump. The contrast felt disturbing. "Clear," I said quietly. We moved farther down the hall. At the very end was a closed door. "Basement?" I asked. The man spoke up quickly from behind us. "There's nothing down there." His voice had an edge of panic now. Chris stepped closer to him. "Stay right here." I grabbed the doorknob and opened it. A narrow staircase led downward into darkness. The smell coming from below was even worse. I aimed my flashlight down the steps. "Police, if anyone's down there, announce yourself." No response, but then something rattled. Metal against metal, definitely movement. The man behind us started apologizing over and over. I began descending the stairs. Each step creaked under my weight. At the bottom was a cluttered basement filled with boxes and old furniture. Across the room stood another door. The rattling sound came from behind it. I approached slowly. "Police! Come out with your hands up!" Silence. I positioned myself to the side of the doorframe and grabbed the knob. Then I swung the door open. What I saw inside changed everything. A man sat chained to a metal pipe in the wall. He looked incredibly thin. His beard was long and unkempt. His eyes were wide with fear. Later we learned he had been missing for almost 2 years. The homeowner had kept him captive that entire time. Earlier that night, the homeowner accidentally left his phone behind when bringing the victim food. The victim managed to activate the voice assistant and call 911. But years of abuse had done something strange to him. When he spoke during the call, his voice sounded like a child. Almost like that's how he had been forced to speak for so long that it became normal. We arrested the homeowner immediately. Paramedics took the victim to the hospital. He survived. But to this day, I still think about the moment dispatch described that call. A frightened voice that sounded like a little girl asking for help. When in reality, it was a grown man who had spent 2 years trapped in that basement. And if he hadn't managed to make that one desperate call, no one might have ever found him. If you found this story interesting or disturbing, drop a comment below and let me know what you think really happened. And if you enjoy true late-night police stories and real-life horror encounters, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this every day. The first thing I noticed was the blood outside the bathroom door. The second thing I noticed was that whoever had been bleeding there was no longer in the house. Or at least, that's what I thought at the time. I've been a patrol officer for a little over 8 years now, and most of that time has been spent working the night shift. When you work nights long enough, you start to see patterns in the calls you respond to. Domestic disputes, drunk drivers, noise complaints, burglar alarms that turn out to be false. After a while, most of them blur together. But every once in a while, there's a call that sticks with you. A call where something just doesn't add up. The one I'm about to tell you happened late one night in October a few years ago. It was around 2:40 in the morning when dispatch sent the call out. "Unit available for a 911 hang-up?" I grabbed the radio. "Go ahead." The caller reported hearing a woman screaming from inside the house next door. The screaming stopped before the caller could confirm what was happening. I looked down at the screen in my cruiser. The address was in a quiet residential neighborhood on the east side of town. Not the kind of area where we usually get serious calls. I happened to be only about 5 minutes away. "I'll take it," I said. The streets were almost completely empty as I drove through the neighborhood. A light rain had started falling, just enough to make the pavement shine under the streetlights. When I turned onto the street where the house was located, everything looked calm. Most of the houses were dark. No people outside. No movement. I parked my cruiser a few houses down so I wouldn't make too much noise pulling up directly in front. Then I stepped out and started walking toward the address. As I got closer, something immediately caught my attention. The front door was slightly open. Just a few inches. That was enough to put me on alert. If someone had reported hearing screaming and the door was left open like that, there was a chance something serious had happened inside. I radioed dispatch. "Unit on scene. Front door appears to be open." They acknowledged and told me another unit was about 10 minutes away. 10 minutes can feel like a long time when you're standing outside a dark house at 2 in the morning. I stepped onto the small front porch and listened. Rain tapped softly against the roof. But inside the house, nothing. No voices, no footsteps, just silence. I knocked firmly on the doorframe. "Police department." No response. I knocked again, louder. Still nothing. At that point, I had enough reason to enter. A report of screaming combined with an open door meant someone inside could potentially need help. I slowly pushed the door open and stepped inside. The living room was directly in front of me. Everything looked normal. Furniture was in place. Nothing appeared broken. No obvious signs of a struggle. I swept my flashlight around the room carefully. clear. Next, I moved toward the kitchen. A small table sat near the window with a glass of water on it. That stood out to me because it looked fresh. Condensation was still forming on the outside of the glass, which meant someone had probably been sitting there recently. "Police department," I called out again. "If anyone's here, make yourself known." My voice sounded louder than usual in the quiet house. Still no answer. I continued toward the hallway that led deeper into the home. There was a small guest bedroom on the left and a bathroom on the right. Both were empty. At the end of the hallway was a staircase leading upstairs. As soon as I placed my foot on the first step, I heard something. A faint sound, like fabric sliding across carpet. It came from upstairs. I froze and listened. There it was again. A soft shuffle. Someone was definitely moving up there. I drew my weapon and started climbing the stairs slowly. Each step creaked slightly beneath my boots. At the top of the stairs was another short hallway with 3 doors. 2 were closed. The third one at the end was slightly open. And that's where the sound seemed to be coming from. I raised my voice again. "Police department! Show me your hands!" No answer. I approached the open doorway and pushed it wider with my foot. Inside was a bedroom. The bed was unmade, and the sheets hung partially off the side. A lamp lay knocked over on the floor next to the nightstand. That was the first thing that looked out of place in the house. I checked the closet. Empty. Looked under the bed. Nothing. Then I stepped back into the hallway. The second bedroom appeared to be a kid's room. There were toys scattered on the floor and posters on the wall, also empty. That left only one room, the bathroom. As I walked toward it, my flashlight caught something dark on the carpet just outside the door. At first, I thought it was a shadow, but when I crouched down, I realized it was wet. I touched it with my gloved finger. Blood. Not a lot, but enough to form a small pool. My heart rate jumped instantly. I radioed dispatch and asked them to hurry the backup unit. Then I slowly pushed the bathroom door open. The light switch was right beside the door, so I flipped it on with my elbow. The shower curtain was closed. There were streaks of blood on the tile floor leading toward the bathtub. I grabbed the curtain and pulled it back quickly. The tub was empty, but more blood was pooled near the drain. It looked like someone had been standing there while bleeding, and then they disappeared. There was no body, no injured person, no explanation. By this point, I knew something very serious had happened inside the house, but I still had no idea where the victim or the suspect had gone. I searched the entire upstairs again. Nothing. Then, just as I started heading back toward the stairs, I heard something from below, a creaking sound, like someone stepping on a floorboard, from the first floor. That immediately set my nerves on edge, because I had already cleared the downstairs, which meant someone had either been hiding or had just entered the house. I moved carefully down the staircase, keeping my flashlight trained ahead of me. The living room looked exactly the same as before. No movement, no sounds. But something felt different. That uneasy feeling that you're not alone anymore. I checked the kitchen again. That's when I noticed something I was almost certain hadn't been open earlier. A small door next to the refrigerator. I had assumed it was a pantry when I first walked through, but now it was slightly open, just enough to reveal darkness inside. I approached slowly and pulled the door open wider. It wasn't a pantry. It was a staircase leading down to a basement. I flipped the light switch at the top. Nothing happened. The bulb must have been burned out, which meant the basement was completely dark. I radioed dispatch again. Possible basement access. Investigating. Then I started down the stairs. The basement was unfinished. Concrete floor, exposed wooden beams, boxes stacked along the walls. As my flashlight swept across the room, something immediately stood out. A metal folding chair in the center of the basement. The floor beneath it was covered in blood. Far more blood than what I'd seen upstairs. Zip ties were attached to the armrests. They had been cut, which meant someone had been tied to that chair. I slowly scanned the rest of the room. That's when my flashlight caught movement in the far corner. A figure suddenly bolted from behind a stack of boxes. "Police! Stop!" The person sprinted toward a small basement window near the ceiling. Before I could reach them, I heard glass shatter. They forced themselves through the window and disappeared outside. I climbed through the broken window after them, slicing my hand on the glass in the process. Outside, rain was still falling. I spotted a dark figure running toward the alley at the end of the block. I chased them for nearly half a block before losing sight of them around the corner. Backup arrived shortly afterward. We searched the entire area. K9 units were called in, but the person who ran from that basement was never found. Later, we learned the house belonged to a man who lived alone. His wallet and phone were still inside the house. The blood we found matched his DNA, but the amount of blood wasn't enough to confirm he died there, which means there's a chance he survived. But here's the strangest part. The neighbor who called 911 was absolutely certain she heard a woman screaming. Investigators never found any evidence that a woman had been inside that house. No female DNA, no clothing, nothing. To this day, the homeowner is still listed as a missing person. The case is technically open. Sometimes when I'm patrolling that neighborhood, I drive past that house. A new family lives there now. Kids ride their bikes in the driveway. Everything looks normal. But every time I see that place, I remember the blood in the basement and the person who ran out that window, because whoever escaped that night was never identified. And we still don't know if they were the victim or the one responsible. If you made it all the way to the end, I want to hear from you. Which story disturbed you the most tonight? Story 1, Story 2, or Story 3? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoy true late-night horror stories like these, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next upload.